Diego Cortez.
Adam Schoenfeld.
Welcome to The Scoop, brought to you by Phil Poker. We had Jack Effel on last week, tournament director of the World Series of Poker. And
tournament direction is so intricate. We need many episodes.
As Matt Savage taught us previously, it's a very complex thing. But actually, in terms of the World Series, there are a lot of issues, some of which we've gotten into, but many remain. And we're going to keep on going with Jack Effel. And if you missed part 1, it's on Card Player TV.
Are there last year, for example, there was an emphasis on player misconduct, players being civil to one another and to the dealers. Are you taking any further steps along those lines, or do you feel that was a success and it's okay as it is?
Well, again, from 2009 or 2008 to 2009, we drew the line in we drew the line in the sand, and we said, okay, guys, we have to take a stand here. We have to make sure that everybody's consistent with the rules across the board, that supervisors are out there, they're making the right calls, we're tracking penalties, we're ensuring that the appropriate penalties are given for the appropriate infractions, and that continuous misconduct is dealt with appropriately, and no one is given a free ride by pure chance. Because the staff is so large as it is, I hired nearly 1,200 part-time employees to come in and work for 7 weeks during the World Series of Poker. 100 of those guys are supervisors. So you have all of these supervisors who work. So it's very likely, without a penalty tracking system, that you get warned by this supervisor one day, and then the next time somebody comes to your table, it's somebody else, and they give you a warning for the same thing. 12 warnings.
Right.
Exactly, because there's no way to track it. But now that we have the system, we call it back, we log it in a just kind of like the DMV.
That was the big innovation, the fact that
the tracking was
you're tracking all the way through.
I think that's universally acclaimed
all the information
as a big advance. Do you feel that it was a mistake when Phil Hellmuth 2 years ago was assessed a penalty and then that penalty was rescinded?
Well, again, I stand behind the decision was made, at the...
Oh, sorry, just one thing. Just for people who aren't as familiar with what we're talking about,
okay.
Although it was on ESPN, but at the end of the night, Phil Hellmuth was at a table, and he abused another player.
Christian Dragomir.
He called another player an idiot, and he was assessed a penalty by the staff at that moment, and the penalty carried over so that he would have to sit out the beginning of the next day's, when the tournament resumed the next day. And sometime between that night and the resumption of the tournament the next morning, the penalty had been rescinded. And I think a lot of people, including myself, assume that the fact that Phil is a well-known player afforded him this opportunity, and that if it was an unknown player, that he probably would be sitting there with a penalty. This is the way it looks when you just see he's behaving, he's gotten a penalty, and then now the higher-ups have overruled whoever gave the penalty. So that's the background of it.
So
you were there. You were the tournament director. So
I was there, and
what do you know
part
that we don't know?
Of the discussions. Well, the one thing I can tell you is, like, anytime you break a rule or you get in trouble or whatever, sometimes people accept whatever their punishment is. Sometimes they fight back and they say this isn't fair.
They appeal.
And they appeal.
They have a right to appeal.
And they have a right to appeal. And if somebody appeals something, you should take it into consideration and understand where the person's coming from, and then at that point make a determination of whether or not you feel whatever punishment was given was fair, right, just, or whatever. And
did you review the videotape, so to speak?
There were a lot of people that were involved in that particular decision making. I think the biggest thing that was realized at that point is that we had done a bad job in being consistent across the board with the issuing of warnings and penalties and so on and so forth from the past few years, and that one supervisor would give you a warning for something, one person would give you a penalty for something, and before penalty tracking it was very inconsistent. And I think you miss making the right call so many times that when you finally make the right call, now you're going to make it at a time in the tournament where it's most crucial on a person who doesn't feel that anybody ever follows the rules anyway because it's so inconsistent with the way it's being enforced. And so the bottom line is that because there wasn't consistent enforcement for particular rules and what is determined to be inappropriate or needling, just because one floor person says, this conduct is inappropriate and the other person says it wasn't, or lets it go, or thinks because it is Phil, or whatever the case may be, that it's okay, or whatever the case may be. But the bottom line is that he had played all those days and had been doing those sorts of things throughout the entire event. And other than minor, Phil, you need to relax and not act this way.
He'd not been formally warned.
He really had no. There was never a form. So now a floor person, rightfully so, steps up and decides, hey, we're going to punish you at this point because what you did was wrong, and he made the right call. But the fact of the matter is he made the right call after all this other damage had been done. And so it was taken into consideration. Phil was then talked to. He was given a formal warning at that point and said, listen, Phil, your conduct has been inappropriate up until now. We're all sitting here and we realize that, it hasn't been properly enforced. And we are going to rescind the penalty. However, moving forward at any point, and which it might have been the greatest thing that's ever happened for tournament poker in terms of the rules and the implementation of the penalty tracking and where we are today, and the fact that everybody is treated fair across the board and everybody understands that there is this process and this communication between the players and the staff, and if this person can't make the decision, it goes to this person and escalates, and there's this process. So now there's more of an opportunity for the decision to be made correctly as opposed to.
But you're not saying that, right? But you're not saying that he did not violate the rule or that the floor person's decision there was incorrect. Just the fact that because there had been inconsistency, you didn't feel comfortable enforcing it at that point. And because he hadn't been warned, you didn't feel it was justified just to go straight to a penalty, even though, of course, like in soccer, you've got the yellow card and the red card, but sometimes somebody does get the straight red card.
You're taking, you don't give a guy so let's say the guy doesn't get the red card in soccer, and he goes through the entire game, and when there's 2 minutes left in the game, now you give him the penalty for the same thing that you forgot to give him a penalty for.
When it's much more crucial.
When it's much more crucial in the event.
I think that your answer is thoughtful, at the very minimum, and I think we'll all agree that that was 2 years ago, and last year general conduct was better. Phil's conduct was certainly better.
Mm-hmm.
So
much better. The
process has now been repaired. Would you think that's a fair statement?
Agreed, absolutely.
Going through things that have become either controversies or mini controversies, the one thing a lot of people talked about last year was players being shut out of the main event. Now, my view is I have no sympathy for the people who were shut out because they had ample chance to sign up. If you show up at the end, and there have been 10 tournaments in the series that have already been sold out, you have to assume that there's a possibility that this will sell out. In fact, that weekend, Adam was out of town and I was here, and I remember talking to Adam on the phone, and I said, they're selling out these days. You better get in here or
I flew back to town to get signed up.
To get signed up. Having said that, when this all took place, and fortunately I'd already been playing and already taken my bad beat and had been eliminated from the tournament, so I wasn't one of the victims. But when this all took place, it did seem, at least from the outside, that there were possible solutions because there was an off day. You could have played a fifth day and then incorporated the people who survived that day into the second day, the second flight of the day twos, or you could have accommodated at least some people because there was space by adding some tables or starting a fifth flight later as people got eliminated. You bring dealers and tables.
Why didn't you just go 10-handed? You could have got 300 more people.
I think that's different.
I think
that's different because some of the solutions affected the integrity of the event, so they're clearly unworkable.
Absolutely.
If everyone's playing 9-handed and now some people play 10-handed, not acceptable. If people are brought in as alternates after you've been eliminated, not acceptable. But starting a fifth day, when you already have 4 days, or starting a fifth day on the fourth day, but 4 hours later and playing 4 hours more. That can work because that doesn't affect the other players. So you're there, and we're trying to address the fact that from outside, people are saying, why did Harris do these things? So what
So,
happened?
you hit all the points and all the different solutions that obviously could have been implemented, which were all thought about and
Right.
all vetted and
In loud voices.
well, not even in loud voices, in a room, and we said we could do this, we could add an extra flight, we could play tomorrow, combine the field, and do this.
Right.
There was a lot of things that we could have done, but the point. As we progressed through the World Series of Poker, this was common. We sold out.
Right.
We were out of seats. This was it. This was the rule. And so now you're going to change this rule because of this one event. And we had done such a great job throughout the entire event, following the rules, doing what we said we were going to do, not, veering from that, and, kind of sticking to that. And so when
But is it changing the rule, for example, if you set up 20 tables and you get more players and you add two tables,
I didn't have 20
does
tables,
that change the...
but I didn't have 20 tables. Where was I going to find 20 tables? I didn't have 20 tables.
I tend to agree with Jack on this. Like they're already in the hallway, which is
Right.
And the structure is so slow that I was only losing about 25% of the field, and that's playing 4 to 5 2-hour levels.
and also adding a day on short or no notice, the logistics, that's like a military operation, isn't it? With the staffing.
It is. It changes everything. And here's the thing: we might have made an extra 200 or 300 people happy, but what about the people that were playing in the event? Maybe they weren't going to be so happy that we changed the rules and we got these extra players in when we had been conducting ourselves a certain way throughout the entire WSOP. Now we're going to change to accommodate them, and we have every right to do that as a business.
Sure.
But in all fairness and in the best interest of the tournament, we didn't feel that was the right.
I think that's a fair point, and one of the things that did start last year, which I hope you continue, and it sounds like you're going to, is that when you say you're going to do something, you do it, and the rules are consistent for each event and also for each person. And I think that one of the perceptions that some people have had is that Harrah's, and you could see the business interest in this, they like the stars to do well, and you agree that there should be once you leave the parking lot, everyone should be treated the same, from the unknown guy who flies in from the Midwest to Phil Hellmuth. You agree with that?
Absolutely.
And that's okay.
The one thing, the one thing that you haven't said, which really is to the credit of Harrah's, is the fact that the real Harrah's antagonists have always brought up the fact that Harrah's is trying to squeeze every last dollar. You go to the tent and they're squeezing every dollar out of the hot dogs and not giving the cops or whatever. Here's a case where you had an easy way to make tens of thousands of dollars more, $100,000 more. All these players want to play. Harrah's is getting $600 a piece from every entry, and you stuck to your guns and you didn't accommodate them when that would have been, from a short-term business standpoint, the easiest decision to make. So, that's like a real credit to Harrah's, the fact that the obvious short-term money decision was, let's just, bring people back, or let's open up another room, or let's, as you said, let's, the first couple, it's still odd to me that there weren't ways to accommodate, but adding, a 10th player to the table or
That would have been
alternates would have been a
disastrous.
farce. Would have been a farce.
Would you agree? Would you agree that you know what to expect if you shut it off, and you know that you're going to have some unhappy players. You don't know what the pushback is going to be from people and the
Sure.
perception from people, and how the players are going to feel if
Right.
you all of a sudden change. The World Championship of Poker in midstream and add an extra flight, or go 10-handed.
I think it did make an important point, because there were more than several very well-known players that ended up being shut out, which is unfortunate in general. But you did make the point. You didn't just cherry pick them out, I hope, or anyone to add them in. Right. So I think that made
If
it
Lane
important.
Flack and TJ
Right.
Collier are
Who
excluded,
got in,
and
yeah.
Patrick Antonius, then
Lane, Patrick, Tom Franklin.
Right.
So-
of course.
There were a few.
Are you guys doing anything this year just to address the load balancing issue, or to encourage players? Let's look at the positive sense. What are you going to do this year?
We are encouraging players to sign up early. Pre-registration has been open since December. The
Oh,
earliest.
can I give you
ever.
cash now?
We have more. No, you can't, but you can go to the Rio.
Like in the 70s. I won't.
You can go to the Rio
Yeah.
right now, and you can get pre-registered and do that now. So we are telling players, sign up now. It's
Well,
it's not too early. Get the
after-
day that you want. And one thing I'll say is we have more players
Right.
signed up for the
Oh, I
main
think the
event
message
right
is
Say
that
now
after
now
last
than we
year,
ever have.
you don't need to do any
And-
publicizing. People will sign up early. Thanks for joining us on The Scoop, brought to you by Phil Tilt Poker.
Full tilt.
And Jack Effel has a lot of important things to discuss, and we're going to bring him back for part 3.
And beyond.
Don't threaten.